Okay, so I discussed this a while ago where, I'm discussing WISP stuff, okay? So today we're going to cover something that's going to benefit a lot of WISPs that are just starting up or don't have a lot of money or in third world countries or, just whatever. Alright, so one of the most important things when you're running a large chunk of infrastructure is stability. You don't want to go down. You want battery backups on all of your tower sites. What's the next most important thing? That your tower sites can be monitored, so you can keep an eye out and see if your tower site has electricity or not. Because if your mains failed and you're running on UPS, you want to know how long you're going to be able to use that, rely on that UPS before it'll go out. That'll give you time to get over there with a generator, or you just ignore it, because if you've got enough batteries there, you can typically leave it for hours on end. Which I'll get into that later, doing calculations of load and all that stuff. So the first things first, we've got a microtik router here, because you kind of need a microtik router to do this little trick. I chose the 3011. The main benefit of this is the... get out of here. That is a standard USB port, folks, which allows you to plug in... Wait for it. I gotta go across the room here. One of these. This is a APC back UPS 850 VA. I hate that, by the way. Watch out for that, because the VA is tricky. You want the watts, not the VA. Okay. Here's the thing. This little guy here, it claims it'll run a site for 90 minutes. Don't entirely trust that. What you want to do is you want to put a bigger battery on that. A battery like one of these, which I've had charging on the bench here to make sure that it works, because my last one did not. So this is a big monster battery. This is a 12 volt 20 amp hour, which is much bigger than the 7 amp hour little chintzy thing that they typically put in these, and I will show you that right now. Alright, so I'm going to try to cover the entire process from beginning to end of setting up a tower site on the cheap with remote monitoring for batteries, UPS, and how to increase your runtime. So first things first, let's open this bastard. I wish I had a wide angle lens, folks. I mean, like, I definitely need some money to go and buy better cameras. Alright, so here's our unboxing of the UPS. Now, I choose APC for these sites particularly because the microtiks work perfectly with APCs. And I will show you how to program that momentarily. There's your USB cable. Alright, so, is that zoomed in? Better not be. It is zoomed in. Son of a bitch. No wonder. Okay. Well, I need to adjust that a little bit, but whatever. Alright, so now we can see even more. That's great. Including my lap, which isn't very handy. Whatever. You're gonna get the idea here. Here's your USB cable. So, what we want here is our USB cable. We want our APC. Stop! Don't forget. They disconnect the battery for shipping. So there it is. So this section here is battery backup. That's surge only. This little guy here will handle 450 watts. And for the average tower site, that's perfectly fine. So I'm going to show you now. Let's get in here. This is what we're dealing with here. So when you go into one of these bad boys, gotta manhandle it here. This is a chintzy little thing that they give you. And by the way, you can buy these batteries at any local battery store. I believe this one here is actually a 7 amp hour, 12 volts, and they're like 25 bucks. So now let's compare the two. There's your standard stock one, and that's what I want to put in it. This will give it a few hours. On a light site, this will give it like an hour. So 7 amp hour, 20 amp hour. Yeah, this is quite a bit better. Alright, so now how do you connect this? Well, I'm about to show you. So, the terminals on most of these back UPSs, and back UPSs are good enough, by the way, for most sites, they are spades. You guys probably recognize those from automotive. Now, best way to connect this is to, actually, let me put this here first. Let's figure out how much wire we need. Yeah, that's more than enough. So I've got a couple of spools of wire here, which I picked up today for this purpose, to show you guys how to do this. And of course, I was actually deploying some of these today, believe it or not. Yeah, on lighter sites, we use these. On bigger sites, we use managed UPSs like APCs or Minuteman. At our data center, we're currently using AbleRex and, let's see here, there we go, AbleRex and Eaton, which I won't go into the long story about our nightmarish encounter with Triplite. Alright, so you're also going to need some of these, and you're also going to need some of these little connectors there. Alright, so I'm going to make up one lead, and then I'm going to show you one that I already made. This is just to teach you guys. Or maybe, you know what, I'll just make up a lead. Fuck it. There we go. Yep, that's the right size. Alright, so here we go. We need 2 of those, we need 2 of these, and we need a soldering iron. Alright, so first thing you want to do is slice your fucking finger open with your X-Acto knife, because that's what I did earlier. Let's get these off the bench. Battery 1, battery 2. Okay, so this knife, by the way, is as sharp as a bloody scalpel. I already did myself in once today. Now, when you're doing this to a UPS, you can also do this to the bigger ones. We do this on the bigger ones too. So, as an example, I've got a Minuteman 1500 VA running at its site. It's a 36 volt inverter, and I actually managed to connect 3 large 100 amp hour cells. So I've got 3 large sealed lead acid 100 amp hour cells. So that's 100 amp hour at 36 volts for that particular site. By the way, this is flux. I love putting flux on my stuff. Just makes things work so much better. Okay, there we go. There's that one. We're going to solder this one first. Okay. So anyway, that site can actually run for about 6 hours, believe it or not. We can run it for 6 whole hours on the batteries alone. And because it is a proper Minuteman rack mount with remote monitoring, we know the runtime and everything on the bastard, which I'll show you that, guys, that stuff shortly at a different part of the video. So I'm just going to get some solder on here. I want to start a war of how you pronounce solder. Apparently the Aussies pronounce the L. They say solder. So I'm getting the solder on there, okay? Now, what you want to do, because I don't like crimping these for critical application, I always solder. You want to get them nice and hot and get the solder on there so that, there we go. There we go. You want to get the solder on there so that it soaks in. When you heat it up, the flux coated copper will draw the solder in. So there's one part of the lead. Let's do the other part now. So I'm going to put this guy on here. This is the end that's going to go into the UPS. This will save you from having to cut wires, because cutting wires can suck. You don't want to do that if you don't have to. You just want to get in there, plug it in. You don't want to void any warranties or damage any equipment. There we go. FYI, if you're wondering what the background noises are, my cats are currently killing each other. It is hilarious. If you don't have cats, I strongly recommend them. Okay, there we go. Got a bunch of solder in there. So this is what the connector is going to look like. This one goes on the large battery. This one plugs into the internal on the UPS. So what you're going to end up with, now that I've shown you how to do that, is a cable looking like this. So here's one that I made earlier, okay? So there's your spades to go into your inverter, or your UPS, and there's your battery connector. So now, there we go. Remember, folks, red to red, black to black. If you don't do that, you're a dumbass. Okay, so let's do this first. Okay, so got our terminals. Usually you put a little bit of dielectric grease on these guys. I put the overlap over the terminal. So we're going to go like this. Boop. And I always put the bolt out. Makes it easier, right? Okay, so bolt out, lock washer. nut. There we go. That's one. I'm going to flip this around because I want the overhang to go over the terminal. It's just an OCD thing. Realistically, it doesn't matter at all. Just a cleanliness thing. Now, something else which I'd strongly recommend is that you put a fuse. You calculate how many amps of a fuse you need on your lead, and you put a fuse in line between your battery and your UPS to make sure that there's any faults, your equipment will not get damaged. Okay, there we go. Here's one side. Yeah, there we go. Here's the other side. Okay, so here is now your extended battery lead. Alright, so now, this is where we bring the UPS into the equation. And by the way, for all those guys who are using bigger UPSs or different types, you can get these little connectors on Amazon for like 16 bucks for a kit. I think they're called Glarks. Nope, they're Andersons. Sorry, they're Anderson 30 amps. So they come as singles, by the way. So get your two singles here, and you solder your wires on and slide them in, and then they just go together in whichever way is necessary. And stack them like this, like that. So you want to make sure you got the right connectors for the job. Alright. So now we have got our UPS. We are going to plug in the battery terminals. There's red to red. Black to black. Now, what I am going to tell you is critical, is to put some tape on here. Especially in here. You want to get your positive set up with a bit of tape. Just over the bare part. If you want to go overkill, you really can't go overkill. Just tape the shit out of it. Alright, so there we go. There's that. Okay, there's one. There is the other. Realistically, if you tape one, it's good enough. Alright, there we go. So now, you can take this UPS here and turn it on. Oh my god, it did not explode. Look at that. So now you can set this thing on a shelf inside of a enclosure, side by side, however orientation you want to do with it. You can stack these batteries up a bit. Just a little important factoid here is you want to make sure that your batteries are fully charged before you do this. I've noticed before that if you're using much larger batteries than the device is rated for, you can actually burn out the charger in this thing. So if this battery goes down to like 9 or 10 volts and you try to charge it with this, it'll draw so much current from the charger that's in here, it will kill the charger. Alright, so this is the first part, getting the battery connected to the UPS, okay? Now, the next part, I believe that we are going to do it on the computer. So I am going to leave these here for a moment. I'm going to get our USB cable here. That plugs in right here. Let me just cut this cable. There we go. Okay, here's your USB cable. So now, where you hook that up, there's actually a couple of ways you can do this, by the way. This is a serial port, so it's a console port. So if you've got a serial type UPS, like a smart UPS, an older one, you can actually cut the end off the cable and put an RJ45 on it, and if you pin it to this, that's another video. There's so many tutorials on there, but you can actually use this to connect a UPS, or with most of the modern UPSs now, you simply plug it in like so. Now you've got UPS monitoring remotely from this guy. Okay, just I figured I'd show you this. So I've got a PoE switch right here on my bench, so I'm gonna plug this into here, get it lit up, and then plug, I always go to port 2 when I'm programming these things. You want to plug that into your laptop. Okay, now we're gonna get to the OBS portion of this broadcast. Now I'm not going to do any fancy programming on this router. We're just doing the basics for the UPS. That's all I'm demonstrating today. So I'm going to open Winbox here, and we are going to connect. Alright, so now, the first thing I like to do when I get these bad boys is update the firmware. Okay, so we'll just download the ARM packages, all of them. Let's see here, ARM. There we go. So we want the main packages, and we want the extra packages. Okay. So now that we've got those bad boys, I'm going to close out of this. I'm just going to remove that one now. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let me just go into that folder. See here, downloads, there we go. I'm going to grab those two. So we'll grab this, and we will move them over to my firmware folder. Okay, so now that we have this, I am going to extract this here. Am I that blind? Extract here. There we go. Okay, so there we go. All packages ARM, and we've got that. So now let's go back in here. Now we're going to upload the packages for the updates. So ARM 6.42.9.mpk. Now, if you want to use your UPS, this is the key part here. This is what I'm getting at, folks. Okay. We're also going to upload an additional package. We're going to install the UPS package at the same time, okay? So, we are going to now reboot this bad boy. Yes, reboot said router. Alright, good. Alright. Okay, this will just take a second. So now it's going to do a software update. While it's doing that, I am going to turn this UPS back on. I'm going to leave it on battery, though. Because that way you guys can see the voltages. Okay, so when this guy's finished rebooting, installing its new firmware, which it is, we can log back in. We can log back in. We can log back in. There we go. We can log back in. Okay, now you will see that everything's updated. One last thing that I always do every single time that I'm doing these guys is go System, Router Board, update your firmware, your board firmware, and this is a much faster reboot. So, there we go. Yes, I want to reboot. There you go. Okay, here we go. So now this thing's fully updated. Now, if you go to System, you'll see UPS. Ooh. So now, you can go in here and we'll put APC 850. And we will put that on USB HID 1. Okay. So, I usually set this so low battery alarm. Okay, so apply. Now, you're going to see this thing detect the UPS. There you go. So these are the basic little stats you're going to get from it. The runtime that it's assuming is 6 hours. It's set to go offline after 4 minutes. Okay. So 79% battery charge. There's your voltage. So you can keep track of that thing. This is a great way to monitor your equipment. Okay. So now we have got that in place. What you want to do over here, by the way, is offline mode. I'm going to set that for 6 hours. Offline time. Okay, so we've got 6:03. Set that for there. Now, do remember there are bugs. There's always bugs. Alright, so now this thing will just run until the battery dies, and then it'll just shut down. You can set it to automatically turn itself off, but this is the key part here that I wanted to show you. So this thing will keep a log of what's going on. Okay, so now I'm going to plug this thing back in. Plug this thing back in over here. There we go. Now that it's plugged back in, you should see the status change. There we go. 125 volts. Alright, so things are happy, okay? You know this thing's online. Now, these are the parameters we really need to keep an eye on. Runtime left, line voltage, and battery charge. Now, I'm going to close this for a second. Now, I am going to move this router, which is plugged in currently to the PoE. I am going to plug it directly into the UPS now. Alright, so, alright. gonna plug this in right here. Bloody safeties. And we're gonna plug this in the back here, and I always like to, you know, put this through here because, you know, that holds the cable in place. It's not amazing, but it works. Okay, so now this is plugged in here. We're gonna switch back over to the computer as this is now booting up and running off of our UPS with super extended battery. Let's move back over. There we go. Alright, so now we should be able to log in. Okay, so let's log in and we're going to see some of the characteristics you see here. Now, you do with the back UPS, which is a cheaper UPS, you do get very limited notification. Very limited ability to look here. Because, like, with the better cheap APCs or other UPSs, you get all these. These guys will come online and let you know that things are good. I know that replace battery works with the lower one, but yeah. Okay, so now that we've got this, there's your runtime left, 603, because these routers use nothing for power. Let us do a line test. Okay. Oh, by the way, you can beep them. It's kind of handy. Okay, so let's us unplug the power. Alright, UPS is still running. And there we go. As you can see, line voltage has disappeared. We've got 12.95 volts remaining in the battery, so that battery is pretty much topped up. Yeah, ignore that, by the way. They just do that. It's something you see with these guys all the time. As long as SNMP's functioning, everything's good. And I think that it's actually Winbox that does that. Okay, so this is a more accurate number now. We've got, let's see here, 5 hours and 40 minutes runtime offline after 5:35. Okay, so now this will report back to Dude over SNMP. This current status of the UPS, the status of the site. So now we know this guy's actually offline. And I will go over to the Dude in a moment and show you guys all that, but I just wanted to give you the gist. If this was a better UPS or a different one, apparently this daemon that's running on this router, by the way, supports all sorts of different UPSs. So you can use a Cyber Power, you can use, I don't know, I think you can use Minuteman with them too. I've got a MGE, which is bought by APC and then eaten. I've got an MGE at one site, which is working amazing with 3 of these monster batteries on it. And it reports everything back on here just perfectly. So there you go. This is the router portion. So now, there you go. What the Dude will do is it will actually pull using SNMP the routers, and it'll tell you important crap like let's see here, runtime 287 minutes. I know that's higher. Battery or the line voltage 116 volts. Load 15%. Battery charge 100%. See, this is not 100%, by the way, even with a UPS like this one. This isn't a proper APC with a monitoring card in it. As you can see, the battery backup time jumps around a bit. The Dude is not 100% with certain things. There's better SNMP monitoring applications, but yeah, as you can see here, these are giving you some pretty good ideas of things. And of course, if a site goes offline, loses mains, it will give you a pretty good indication of how long it's going to stay online for, and if you've got enough time to get there with a generator, or if you just throw your hands in the air. So yeah, that's typically what we do. So there we go. Riverview is pretty consistent. Load 14%, volts 116, battery charge 100%. Now you can go in here as well and look in the logs. So here we go. Earlier on in the video, I showed you how to make some battery leads and some cool shit like that. Well, now I figure I'm going to draw on stuff for you. So we've got our basic, you know, small APC UPS for repeater sites and small tower sites. Then we've got a slightly larger configuration for a much larger site. And then we've got a big site. This is how to make your site run for quite a long time. Okay, so yeah, let's get to this then. So first of all, I showed you guys earlier how to make up a cable for, let me just get my mic right here, make up a cable for connecting a large external battery to replace a battery in a small UPS. The benefit of this is that you get much greater runtime at a much lower cost. This allows you to also remotely monitor said site through the MikroTik, which lets you see your runtime on the battery and see your voltage, and that mains has failed. The mains failing is the most important part, is that you get an email saying mains failed at such and such a site. So right here I'll show you quickly. Now I did talk about fuses and stuff. So first of all, we're using an APC back UPS 850 VA. They're cheap. I think you can get them for about $100. They'll handle up to 450 watts, like real watts, so that's more than enough for most of the repeater sites or most small towers, you know. You got a little community and you got some equipment there, whatever. Alright, so if we do the math here, the maths, 450 watts at 120 volts works out to about 3.75 amps, okay? Now here's what gets people screwed up. It's not actually 3.75 amps pulling off that battery. Oh, hell no. Multiply that by 10. 450 watts at 12 volts equals 37.5 amps. So you need like pretty much number 10 or greater cable for your battery lead down to this, okay? You want to make, when you choose a fuse, because you always want fuses in between your batteries and your equipment to make sure that shit doesn't catch fire or blow up. This case here, I'm going to suggest a 40 amp fuse. I also don't suggest loading your UPS at more than 80%, especially a chintzy little thing like this, okay? Like this is good for like a regular site that's maybe drawing up to 100 watts at the worst, okay? Like I'm suggesting like a few backhauls maybe, and like a small router, you know, that's this kind of application. Okay, so here's the connectors you want to use. This is a male spade connector. The UPS actually uses this one here, which is a female spade connector, because it's, well, as you can see, it's got a hole. You put things in a hole, and you call that a female. There you go. All right, so now let's draw. Okay, I think I want some red here. Yeah, I'm on my wires layer. Okay, so here's how we typically do this. So we would go from the red terminal on the battery down to your fuse, and then from the fuse into your UPS. Now, your black, simply enough, goes into the UPS as well. And as I showed you earlier in the video, you just use these little connectors here, and you plug them in, and you're good to go. So this will protect your UPS from blowing up. Again, you want to make sure that you use some number 10. I'm going to actually put that right there. Let's see here. Use number 10 copper, aka 10 gauge copper. Okay, so that's what you want to use here in this application. Let's make that bold so you meatheads get it, okay? So this is pretty much what you should be using, 10 gauge copper. But again, if you run this thing at a full 450 watts, the 10 gauge might get slightly warm, but I do not expect anybody to run a UPS like this at more than 80%. In fact, I would not really expect you to run a UPS like this at, let's see here, more than 40%. Because this is just for small sites. Remember, this is not intended for a large site, okay? So now, we have gone to the point, or made it the point of how to hook this thing up, okay? I showed you your connectors, blah, blah, blah. Now, don't forget, I showed you guys before that you can connect this to your MikroTik. Let's use green for that. Or, what's a good UPS or USB color? There we go, we'll go blue. I'm going to draw a blue wire. Yay, it goes in over here, see? That's how you connect it. Yay! So, you can do this with a hex PoE, you can do this with a 3011. God forbid you use a 2011, but I'm pretty sure you can use it on a 2011. Pretty much anything running Router OS with a full USB socket on it. Okay, so that is a small UPS. Now, let's just see here. Let's move up to something a little bit bigger. Oh yeah, I should do a runtime calculation on here. Okay, let's assume that you're only running 100 watts on here. That's roughly around the most that I would expect you guys to use, okay? So let me pop open the handy-dandy calculator. Okay, so in this example, I used a 12-volt 100 amp hour battery. Okay, so we're going to go 12 times 100. That gives us 1,200 watt hours, okay? So 1,200 watt hours now. That means that you can draw... well, 1200, well, actually, technically, you can only run about 600 watts for 1 hour, because if you put a massive load on it, it's got a weird non-linear, curve where it goes meh, like with a limp dick. So if you run anything at the full rated capacity of the cell will actually only give you half the capacity. But if you kind of suckle at it a little bit, then you can usually get the full capacity of the cell. Okay, so now at 100 watts, let's divide this by 100. So you can get an estimated 12 hours, but in reality, I would say more like 10 hours. So with a UPS like this, and a battery like that, and a router like this, you can expect to get about 8 to 10 hours out of it with a big battery like that. So that's more than enough time to get there with a generator. And that's basically what you want. The whole idea here is you've got a tower site sitting up in the top of a hill in the back of a farmer's field, and it's rained for days and everything's mud, and you don't want to go up there. So this is what's going to get you by until you can get your ATV up there. All right, moving on to bigger things. Okay. Most of you guys are familiar with the backs of UPSs, like you guys are familiar with the backs of vehicles. So if you look here, this is just a standard stock photo of the back of a UPS. It could be a Minuteman, it could be a Eaton, it could be an APC, God knows what it is, okay? But you see, the thing that I really am interested in showing you guys here is this pretty little thing on the back here. Let's use a green. This port here. This is where you want to get excitable. This guy right here is your external battery connector, and it's just a standard Anderson Quick Connect, okay? You can get these off the shelf in most of your battery shops. Okay, now, that being said, that means that you can stick this thing in your rack, and then you can rack up some batteries underneath it. Now, remember, I say to fuse things, because fusing things is critical. I will get to an off-grid system in a later video, because everybody wants to know how to do off-grid systems. Okay, we're going to get there, and full DC plant stuff. But at this point in time, I'm showing you guys how to get by as a low-budget WISP, okay? So, let's hook up our battery leads now. Okay, so see this fuse right here. If you look at my calculations here, this is a 1000 VA UPS. I'm using that for clean numbers, okay? So that's 700 watts peak at 120 volts, which is 5.83 amps AC. Now, if you go down to your actual bank current, 700 watts divided by 24 volts will give you 29.1 amps. That means I want you to use a fuse size of 35 amps. Now, if you do the maths and you take 700 watts and divide it by 100 amp hours, you're going to get roughly about, or hold on a second here, I did that wrong. Let's look at my spreadsheet here. Watt hours, runtime, watt hours at peak wattage. Okay, so with this guy here, let's see here, let's do a quick calculation. Okay, so we know that a battery bank is 24 volts at 100 amp hour. Okay, so let's go, let's see here. That's 24 times 100. It's going to give you 2,400 watt hours, okay? And again, that's if you're suckling at the batteries and not running your UPS hard, okay? Divide that by 700. Yeah, that gives you 3.42 hours. So let's down that, because you always want to, you always want to kind of roll that down, okay? So we're going to say 3 hours. You can get an additional 3 hours of runtime at 700 watts with this battery bank right here, okay? So now, fuse. Let's see here. So we're running at 30 amps at 700 watts. I checked the UPS's surge values on these, and they don't actually show surge values anymore. But usually you can surge them about 25%, okay? So, let's see here. So that's 30 amps, okay? So you're going to want to use something slightly larger. So, because this is mainly to protect your equipment in case of a fault or a dead short. It's not to stop it from going over current just by drawing too much power. So, that's the case. Put a 35 amp right here, okay? So you're going to go 35 amps right here. This is going between your cells, okay? That means if the battery bank faults, it will protect. And if there's a fault to the UPS, it will protect. So now you take your red wire, run it down to your UPS. I'm not going to connect it to any specific terminal because they all vary, okay? And then you take your black and you run it down to your UPS. Simple enough, right? Now again, you want to make sure that you gauge your cable up right. So if you're running about 30, let's see here. If you're running around 29 amps, 30 amps, number 10 should cut it, but I would size it up a little bit. Maybe go number 8 or number 6 off these guys, just keep it a little bit heavier. To go on to your Anderson Quick Connect here, and you just plug it in the back. Boom! You got your Ethernet connection here for remote monitoring, and you've got your Anderson to externally connect your batteries without butchering your UPS. Okay, now moving on to bigger fish. Yes, this is a configuration that I personally use. You can take this configuration here, like I just showed you, and you can bank up as many bloody batteries as you want on that, as long as you're smart about it. Because remember, the charging circuitry in most UPSs is finite. It varies anywhere from 5 amps up to about 25 amps to the battery bank, depending on the size of the UPS and the type of the UPS. Some UPSs will actually have a charge current that's equal to the amount of outbound DC current. I believe those are usually online UPSs, double conversion, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. So, I will show you again how to connect said batteries. So in this case here, we actually have 3 fuses. This is just me being overly cautious, okay, because I am paranoid. So we're going to have, again, every time you set up a string of batteries, you want a fuse in between your 2 batteries at the very least, because that'll break the whole string if something shorts, okay? So there we go. You got your fuse in there for safety purposes. And now, here we go. This guy here goes onto one lead. And this guy here goes to the other lead. And that's how you connect it. And then this one goes out. So you want all these fuses to be rated at 35 amps. You can actually go 40 amps here on the batteries if you really, really want to. That won't harm anything, because if you short these strings, it doesn't matter if you've got a 60 amp fuse on there. It's going to pop. But key here is that you don't want anything bigger than you need for the UPS. 35 amps right there. Okay. So now, what do you do with your black wire? Well, if you haven't figured it out by now, then you need a different type of video. Okay, so we're going to go like this. And then we're going to go like this, combining the 2 negatives on here. And then that negative is going to stem off. There we go. So you got your positive and negative going to your Anderson Quick Connect to plug into your batteries, or into your UPS there. Okay, so that's how you can really beef up a site. We actually have a site. It's one of our core towers, and this is exactly what we did. I did a power or a load analysis at that tower, and determined that we only needed a 1000 VA UPS. The site itself has a bunch of air fibers and stuff at it. It's got a couple of routers, blah, blah, blah. And it is running, I think, only 300 watts. Yeah, 300 watts, I think, is what it's running, okay? So that's just under half the capacity or capability of the UPS itself, okay? Then we took these batteries here, 4 of these guys right here, and we stuck them on shelves underneath the UPS and simply plugged them into the back of the UPS. Now, fortunately, some UPSs, you want to do a little bit of research before you do this if you're trying to save money, okay? Because you don't necessarily have to buy the stock external batteries to plug into your UPS. Just don't tell the manufacturer that you made your own. This is a much cheaper way to do it, saves you money, and you get a hell of a lot more runtime, okay? But some UPS manufacturers program it, hard code it basically into the UPS to calculate runtime based on their external battery packs. Minuteman's notorious for that. So you'll go into the software after you've added your additional strings of batteries, and you say, oh, I added 1 external battery. Oh, I added 2 external battery, and then it'll give you your estimated runtime. The better UPSs are the dumber ones, the ones that actually monitor your battery bank voltage. Those battery bank voltages are the best way to monitor, because you can keep stacking your batteries up, and your voltage will drop slower and slower and slower with the more batteries you add to it. But again, within reason, because you don't want to have a battery hit critical at like 10.5 volts and then overcurrent the whole circuit and, you know, pop fuses and shit. Because remember, as your voltage on your bank goes down, your current will increase depending on the load. Once again, why I do not recommend running your UPSs at full capacity, because it's hard on them, okay? So anyway, I'm ranting, I'm rambling. That being said, this is what you need to do. And when you're looking for a good UPS, you want to look for a pure sine wave one. God, they're great, especially. You want something that switches fast, and you want something that is kind of dumb when it comes to estimating runtime. You want something that's not asking you to check off how many batteries, external batteries you've added. And if you are stuck with one of those, just look up the battery bank and how much runtime it adds and do your math, and then you can just calculate how many extra battery packs you have to add based on the battery bank that you're building, okay? So there you go, folks. I believe that's all that I need to explain to you so far for beefing up your sites at minimal cost so that you have better runtime. I can't think of anything else. I'm pretty sure that that's it. Okay, so anyway, if you enjoyed my video today, let me know. If you have any suggestions or comments or whatever, then let me know. And don't forget to smash the like button or the subscribe button. I don't know, whatever the hell people say. And this is me signing out.